In this video, we're going to look at a small package for Django that allows you to perform actions after the response has been sent back to the client. And this is a package called django-after-response, and it's a simple alternative to things like Celery. And this can be useful when the logic you need to perform after the response has been sent is simple and it doesn't require complex workflows like you can build with Celery. So let's get started. If you're enjoying this content, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more Django content. And consider buying a coffee to support the channel. We've got a link in the description. Let's dive in. Now let's start with a look at the GitHub page for Django-after-response. It allows simple asynchronous execution of code after the response has been generated. And if we scroll down to the README section here, let's read a little bit more about this. Now, tools like Celery are great, but often they are overpowered for the task at hand. And if you use Celery, you'll know that it comes with other requirements like daemons and task queues. And Django-after-response provides a simple alternative, and it's going to execute code after the request is complete without the need for any additional tools like task queues to be installed. So in order to use Django-after-response, we can copy this pip install command. I'm going to open up VS Code where I have a terminal open at the bottom, and that's a Python virtual environment. And I'm going to paste that command in here, and we can remove the $ at the start. And that's going to install Django-after-response into the environment. And once that's installed, we can write code that will execute after the response, and then we can hook that up in our Django view functions. So I have a very simple project here in VS Code. If we go to the core application, you can see we have a single view that's returning an index.html template. And that template at the moment is very simple, just contains a header1 tag saying upload image. So we're now going to create an example where a user uploads a file to Django, and we want Django to perform some kind of processing of that file and then save a new file to the file system. And we want this to be done using Django model image fields. So the files that we're going to use are going to be images. Now the reason we're going to do this is because the task of processing images, this is something that can be quite intensive and it can take quite a long time to do. And it's the kind of thing that you would want to move out of the request response cycle. You want to return a response as quickly as possible to your user, and then you want to perform these kind of tasks such as image processing in a separate thread or in some kind of different stream of work than the response that you're going to generate and then send back to your user. So let's start by going to the Django models.py file, and in this file we're going to create a class, create a model called image. That's going to inherit from the Django model class. And we want this model to have two image fields. The first one is going to contain the image that was uploaded by a user, and later on we'll write the code that allows the user to upload an image. So that's going to be an instance of the image field, and we're going to specify an upload directory within the media directory, and that's going to be the images directory. Now I'm going to copy this line of code below, and we're going to create a second field, and I'm going to call this processed image. So the idea is the user will upload an image, and then we will perform some kind of image processing in Python, and we'll save the result of that to another image field on the model. And let's upload this to another directory within the media directory. We're going to call it images-processed. And because this is going to be generated after the initial image field, we can set null equals true and blank equals true on this model. Now you'd normally want to link this image that was uploaded to the user that actually uploaded the image, but we're going to skip that to keep things as simple as possible. Now one thing to note about Django's image field is that in order to use that, we need to install Pillow, which is the Python imaging library. So we can run pip install and then it's Pillow, and that's going to install that into the Python virtual environment. And once we've done that, we can make the migrations for this project, and then we can run the migrate command, and that's going to create our database with the appropriate tables, and we can then start developing code against those database tables. Now, since we're going to be working with media files that are uploaded by users to our server, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Django settings.py file, and I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and we're going to set a couple of these media settings here. The first one is going to be the media root. And the media root is the directory on the file system where all of the media files are going to live. So it's going to be in the base directory, and then it's going to be a media directory underneath that base directory. Now the base directory is set at the top of settings.py, and that's just the project root directory. So we're going to create a directory underneath that called media in order to store the media files. And we can also set the media URL here, and that's going to be /media. And don't forget the slash at the end of that as well. So now we have the media set up, and we also have a model that contains two image fields. Let's now go to index.html. we have a very simple template here. What we're going to do now is allow the user to upload an image in a form, and that's going to be done over a post request. So we're going to set the method of post in this form, and because we're going to allow a file upload, we need to set the enc type or encoding type property on the form, and we set that to multipart/form data when we are uploading a file to the server. So that just uses a different encoding type that's optimized for file uploads, and we can close the form at the bottom. Now, because we have a form here that's going to send a post request, in Django, whenever we send an unsafe method like post or put, we need to add the CSRF token to the request. So I'm going to add that now, and I'm going to fix the template tag here. So by adding the CSRF token like this, Django will embed a hidden input field with that token to the form. That's going to be sent when the form is submitted. Now let's create an input of type file, and we'll give this input a name of file as well. And I'm going to accept particular file extensions, so we can pass the accept attribute to this input. And we want to accept only PNG files and JPEG files. And don't forget to close the input at the end here. Now this accept parameter allows you to tell the input what file types are accepted, and it does that by allowing you to provide a comma separated list to the attribute. So here we're saying we only want to accept PNG or JPEG files. And if you want to know more about this accept parameter with files in Django, check out the video we did previously on restricting file types that can be uploaded by users. That should be appearing on the screen now. Now the final thing to do in the form is add a button that allows the user to submit the form. So let's do that now. And we're going to save this, and we're going to start the server at the bottom, and we're going to navigate to this index URL. So I'm on the page now, and you can see the header saying upload image, and we now have a file field here that allows us to select an image from the file system, and then we can upload that using this submit button. And we're not going to focus on styling this in any way, so we're just going to leave it as it is. What we're going to do now is go back to VS Code and go to the views.py file, and it's this index view here that we're going to work with. So when a user submits that form, it's going to send a post request to the back end. So let's check if the request.method is equal to a post request, and if it is, we know that that form has been submitted and an image should have been sent along with that form. So let's extract that image now. If we go back to index.html, we gave the field the name of file. So let's go back here, and we're going to extract that from the post request. So let's create a variable called image, and that's going to be equal to request.files.get. And we're going to get the submitted file, which had the name of file. So let's extract that. And when you submit files using a form like this, you can access those in the request.files attribute on the request object. Now let's start by printing out this image, and we're also going to print out what type this image is. And we can save this and go back to the browser, and I'm going to submit this form with one of the images I'm selecting. So I've selected a JPEG image, and we're going to submit this now. When we do that, we're redirected back here, but let's go to VS Code and look at the terminal here. Now on the terminal, when we print the image, we get back the JPEG file here, and when we print the type of that, we have a type in Django called in-memory uploaded file. So Django has some objects that are wrappers around files in Python, and this is one of them. It's called in-memory uploaded file. Now what we want to do with this image is we want to save it to the image field and create a new instance of this image row in the database. So let's go back to views.py. And at the top here from our models file, let's import the image model. And what we're going to do, if we remove the print statements, is we're going to call image.objects.create in order to create a new image in the database. And we're going to pass the image that we've got from the request and store that in the image field that we have on the model. Now that's not going to populate the processed image. We're going to do that later on, but it is going to create a new row in the database, and the processed image for that is going to be null. Now what we want to do next is actually take the uploaded image, and we want to perform some image processing in Python and store the result of that on that field there called processed image on the model. So let's create a new file here in the core application, and I'm going to call this image processing.py. And I'm going to paste some code in here, and you don't need to know what this code is going to do, but basically it's going to use the Python imaging library, and it's going to perform some image processing using different functions and utilities in the Python imaging library. Now, if you're not interested in image processing, you can skip to the section after this, but let's walk through what's going on here. So first of all, we create a function here called processImage, and that takes the image model that we've created in views.py, and that's going to be this one here. It's going to take that as a parameter, and then what we're going to do is we're going to access the image field on that model, and we're going to open that using pillow and that's going to create a pillow image object. And when we have that object, we can perform operations such as resizing the image. And then we're using a list comprehension below, and we're calling the image.rotate method. And we're creating 4 random rotations of that image within that list comprehension. And then below, we are using a Gaussian blur, and that's going to apply a blurring effect to each of the 4 images. And then again, for each of those images, we are quantizing the image down to 16 colors. And then finally, we create a 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗲𝗲 object, and we select at random one of the 4 images. We print out the histogram of that image to the terminal, and we save the image that we've selected to the 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗲 object, and we're selecting a format of PNG for that. Finally, we are creating a content file object in Django, and if we look at the text here, we can see that's a file-like object that takes raw content rather than an actual file. And on the final line here, we do need to fix this. I'm going to fix that now. What we're doing is we're taking the image model, and remember that's the image Django model that was passed into the function as a parameter, and we're accessing the processed image field on that, and we're calling the image field's save method. Now when you call the save method on an image field, it's going to save the resulting image to the file system, and we're giving the saved processed image the same name as the original file name, and we pass that content file in here as a second parameter. And when we pass save equals true to the image field save method, that's also going to save the parent Django model itself with the new field. And that's what it says here. When you pass save equals true, this keyword argument means the model itself is going to be saved. So you can pass that to an image field's save method in order to also save the model class. Now again, I'm not going to go into this in any detail, it's not too important, but the point of this function is to perform multiple complex image operations, and this is going to take quite a bit of time to take the original image and perform each of these image operations, and some of them are done 4 times as well in these list comprehensions, so it's going to take a little while to run through this. And what we want to do is show the latency of that in our Django view when it's sending the response to the client. And then after we've shown that, we're going to offload this processing using the django-after-response package, and that allows us to very quickly return a response to the user and perform this kind of processing after the request. So let's now save image processing.py, and we're going to go back to views.py, and at the top here from image processing, we're going to import that function, and let's amend the code that we have in the index view. So when we call image.objects.create, we're going to get back an image, and let me rename this actually. I'm going to call it image model. So this is a Django model, and what we're going to do is pass that into the process image function. So let's call process image and pass that in. And that function doesn't return anything. If we go back to image processing.py, at the bottom here, all it's going to do is perform the processing and then save the results of that to the model's processed image field. And that's also going to save that file, the newly generated image, to the file system. So let's go back to views.py, and when we've processed the image and saved it to the model field, before we return a redirect to index.html, we are going to generate a one-time message using Django, and that message is going to tell the user that the file was uploaded successfully. Now in order to do that, at the top from django.contrib, we're going to import the messages framework. And then just below the process image function, we can use the messages.success function, and we pass the request into that along with a message. So the message I'm going to pass in is just file uploaded successfully. Now I don't know if you're familiar with the messages framework. I'm going to go to the documentation now. And what the messages framework does is very common in web applications when you need to display a one-time notification message, and this is often called a flash message. So when you need to display that to the user after processing a form or some other type of input, this is what you want to use. And if you're interested in a video on the messages framework, let me know in the comments. Now what I'm going to do is scroll down in this documentation, and there's some code that we can copy directly into our template, and here it is here. For displaying messages, we need to actually add some code to our Django template. So let's copy this block here, and let's go back to VS Code and go back to the index.html file, and just underneath the form element, I'm going to paste this code that we copied from Django, and we're going to paste that in here, and what it's doing is checking if we have any messages in the context, and if we do, we use an unordered list with the class of messages, and we loop over each message in that context, and we then render out the message here within an li tag. Now I'm going to change this very slightly by adding a couple of classes from Bootstrap to the unordered list that's surrounding the messages. So let's add the alert class, and we're also going to add alert success. And finally, I want to give some margin top to this so that it's separated from the form above. So we can add MT4 for that. Now we're ready to test this out. So what I'm going to do is get a large file, a large image file from the internet. So I'm going to go to Wikimedia here, and I've literally Googled large images. And what you can do is grab one of these images, and in order to demonstrate that latency, if we use a large image, it's going to be more clear why using something like django-after-response is beneficial. Now I've grabbed the first image here, and it's called Shot from the Sky from some army show in 1945. What we're going to do is go back to VS Code, and we already have the Django server running. So I'm going to go back to the browser, and we're going to go back to the application, and let's upload a file here. So I'm going to choose a file from my file system, and let's choose that Shot from the Sky image, and we're going to submit that. And we're getting an error here that the in-memory uploaded file has no attribute image. Now the error here is happening on line 7 of the process image function. So let's go back to ImageProcessing.py, and we can go up to line 7. Now this image model that's being passed in, that should be a Django model, and it's the model we created called image, and that has the attribute or the field called image. But apparently this is an in-memory uploaded file. So let's go back to views.py, and yes, that's the problem here. We create the model, but we're not actually using it. We're passing in the in-memory image. So let's change that now, and we're going to try this again. So let's go back to the browser, and I'm going to refresh this. And that's going to resubmit that post request with the uploaded image. And you can see the latency here. There's a delay there when that image is being processed. And then finally we get back the page, and we can see the message that's displayed from the Django messages framework. That tells us that the file was uploaded successfully. Now I'm going to select a file again here, and we can see again that latency. You can see that the request is in flight for, let's say, 2 or 3 seconds. And depending on what you're doing, that could even be longer. So for example, a user might upload 20 images at once if your system allows that. And that's going to generate significant amounts of latency. Now, typically what you would do in a situation like this is you would use something like Celery, and you would offload this work to a task queue and allow the response to be generated quickly for the client whilst the background worker performs the image processing. But imagine that you only have one single view in your application that needs to perform this kind of background logic. Installing Celery might be a lot of overhead for a simple use case like that. So django-after-response gives us an alternative to that. So let's go back to this documentation. And in fact, before we do that, I'm going to go to the Django admin UI. And we're going to log in with this admin user that I have. And I'm going to show that the file has been processed in the Django admin. So we don't have our image model that we've been working with in the admin UI at the moment. So let's go back to VS Code and go to admin.py. And we're going to import from our models package that image that we have. And then we can call admin.site.register in order to register that image model with the Django admin UI. Now, once we've done that, we can go back and refresh the admin, and we can see now the image model. So let's click that, and we're going to look at the most recently generated image. And we can see we have 2 fields, one for the image itself that was uploaded by the user, and another for the processed image. So let's click both of these. And we're getting a 404 not found for the image that was uploaded. Now the reason for this is because we need to tell Django to serve the media files in development. Now I'm going to go to the documentation on managing static files. And if we look at the sidebar on the right, there is a section on serving files that are uploaded by a user during development. So during development, we can serve the user uploaded media files from the media root using the serve view in Django. And note that that is not suitable for production use. But we're going to do it in this video so we can actually see the generated files. Now what we need to do is we need to change the root URL conf in the Django project. So let's copy these lines of code, and we're going to go back to VS Code, and I'm going to open up urls.py within the project directory, and we can paste the 2 imports, and we can go back to the documentation. And what we need to do is append this statement here to the URL patterns. So let's copy that. Let's go back to urls.py, and we're going to append that here. And this time, if we go back to our application, this is 404 not found, but now that we're serving the static files, we can refresh this page and we get back the image. Now I'm going to go back to the admin UI, and let's look at the processed image that's been generated by that function. And you can see some of the effects here. We've rotated the image at a random angle. And we've also applied that Gaussian blur, as well as resizing the image and quantizing it down to 16 colors. And after we finish that processing, we're saving the result to the processed image field on this Django model. Now we saw on the front end that this is taking up some latency. So when we submit the form, if we go back to the page here and refresh, when we submit this after choosing a file, it takes 2 to 3 seconds at least for this response to be generated. It's not a deal breaker, but as I said earlier, if we're uploading a lot of files, that can have a detrimental effect. So let's go back to the GitHub page for Django After-Response. Now we've already installed it, so we can now add it to the installed apps in the Django settings. Let's go to settings.py and scroll up to installed apps. Now after the core application, I'm going to add that. And then we can go back to the GitHub page, and it's very easy to use this. All we need to do is decorate our function that performs the task with the after-response.enable decorator. And in the example, they're doing this with a task that sends an email, and that's another action that you might want to take outside of the request response cycle. So what I'm going to do is just copy this decorator, and we're going to go back to VS Code, and I'm going to open this image processing module, and we're going to paste the decorator in here, and we're going to decorate this process image function. Now we need to import after response, so let's do that now at the top. And once we've decorated the function, what we can do is go back to views.py, and when we call process image, rather than just calling the function normally, what we can do is we can call after response on this. And by adding that call to after response, what it's going to do is it's going to call the process image function after the request response cycle has finished. And that means that all of the logic in this function is going to be executed after the response has been sent to the user. So in essence, we're deferring the execution of that function until after the response is sent. And that's going to result in a performance improvement because we're not performing all of these image processing actions before sending the response to the user. Instead, we just generate the response, and then after that's done, we pass in our new image model, and all of these operations can be performed on the server after the fact. So let's go back to views.py, and we're going to save this, and we're going to test this out on the front end. Let's go back to our page here, and what we're going to do is upload a new file. So I'm going to choose that same file, and once we've got that, let's submit this, and you can see we get back a response very quickly, almost instantly in fact. And after the response comes back, all of the image processing, including the printing of this histogram, is going to be performed. Now I want to demonstrate that again, so I'm going to minimize the browser as we submit this. So let's minimize this browser, and I'm going to show the terminal while we actually submit this form. So let's submit this, and we get back our file uploaded successfully, but you can see on the terminal that some actions are being performed after we get the page back from the Django server. So let me try this again. If we go back to the page without the Django message and we select the file for upload, when we submit this, we're going to get back the message, but notice on the terminal that the actions are being performed after we get the page back. So we can see the message, but on the terminal, there's still some processing going on, and that's happening in that process image function that we have within imageprocessing.py, and we've decorated that with the after-response.enable decorator. So this is much more performant because it's sending back a response very quickly to the user, and it's performing those actions in the background using this very simple decorator. And this is much simpler than installing Celery and using something like Redis and RabbitMQ in your project. So if you have these simple pieces of logic and you don't have complex workflows around tasks, you can maybe consider using Django After-Response to perform some of those actions in a much simpler manner. So that's all for this video. If you have any opinions on this topic, or if you know of any other good packages for background processing tasks, let me know in the comments. And also let me know if you would consider using this package, Django After-Response, in your Django projects. And if you have any other requests, drop them in the comments as well. Thanks again for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you've learned anything, and subscribe to the channel for much more Django content, and consider buying the channel a coffee if you're enjoying this content as well. We've got a link in the description, and we'll see you in the next video.